The 1970s American dining landscape brimmed with curious culinary experiments and ambitious entrepreneurs, many eager to capitalize on the decade's evolving tastes. Some brands promised modern convenience, others vowed novelty, while a few thrived on quirky decor or themed menus. Yet hidden beneath these initial flourishes were troubling inconsistencies. Outdated concepts, weak branding, supply chain misfires, and stubborn refusal to adapt to changing consumer expectations. As the decade slipped away, these fragile empires began to crumble, leaving behind only grainy photographs, dusty advertisements, and faint memories. Today, we'll uncover the harsh realities that forced 20 once familiar restaurant chains from the 1970s to vanish and explore what their downfalls reveal about a food industry that never stops reinventing itself. Number 1. Minnie Pearl's Fried Chicken. Emerging in the late 1960s and attempting rapid nationwide expansion by the early 1970s, Minnie Pearl's Fried Chicken carried the face of a beloved country comedian, but that branding alone couldn't sustain it. According to archived financial reports and investigative pieces in business journals from that period, this chain struggled with poor franchisee support, inconsistent recipes, and inadequate quality control. Many locations reportedly failed to maintain uniform cooking standards, resulting in chicken that was often dry, under-seasoned, or greasy. Shifting consumer expectations in the 1970s demanded consistent quality, yet Minnie Pearl's frequently disappointed patrons who were becoming more discerning as the fast food landscape matured. Its aggressive franchising strategy outpaced operational expertise. With over 500 franchises sold rapidly, there was insufficient vetting of operators and no cohesive supply chain. By analyzing trade publications of the era, it's clear that the chain's downfall was sealed by financial scandals, lawsuits over unpaid royalties, and mounting debt. Many outlets defaulted on lease obligations, and customers, who had more reliable alternatives, abandoned the brand. With each closure, trust deteriorated. The menu lacked innovation, relying on a narrow range of fried chicken items without introducing fresh sides or adapting to subtle changes in tastes. Baby boomers and early Gen X consumers gravitated toward brands offering better consistency or novelty. Minnie Pearl's represented a chaotic attempt at Southern-style chicken in a market soon dominated by better-managed giants. By the late 1970s, almost every Minnie Pearl's location had shuttered, leaving behind a cautionary tale for franchise operations and a legacy of unfulfilled promises. Number 2. Sambo's. This chain spread rapidly across America in the 1970s, known for its pancake breakfasts and a unique illustrated theme. However, research into newspaper archives, consumer advocacy group reports, and civil rights organization statements reveals that Sambo's branding, derived from children's books and perceived as racially insensitive, sparked increasing public backlash. As Americans in the 1970s grew more socially aware and less tolerant of culturally stereotyped imagery, Sambo's faced mounting criticism and protests. Beyond the controversy, they offered affordable breakfasts, but failed to stay competitive with evolving family dining spots that improved both ambiance and menu variety. Their decor and marketing aesthetic, considered outdated and offensive by the late 1970s, alienated a broad swath of potential customers. Meanwhile, rivals modernized interiors, introduced healthier items, and responded to consumer demand for improved coffee, fresher ingredients, and better dietary transparency. Sambo's leadership attempted rebranding efforts too late, and financial stressors from overexpansion made it impossible to reposition successfully. Litigation and community boycotts forced closures. By analyzing TV broadcast segments and corporate filings, it's evident that their inability to address public concerns about the name, coupled with stiff competition from other breakfast chains offering more progressive concepts, sealed their fate. Their disappearance reflected the broader cultural shift away from insensitive themes and a growing emphasis on inclusive marketing strategies. By the early 1980s, nearly all Sambo's units were sold, renamed, or permanently closed, becoming a stark reminder that tone-deaf branding in an era of social awakening is a direct path to irrelevance. Number 3. Burger Chef. Once a formidable competitor to McDonald's and Burger King, Burger Chef introduced innovative concepts like the Fun Burger and helped pioneer the kids' meal concept. Yet scrutinizing internal memos revealed in old business magazines and interviews with former employees preserved in archives shows that inconsistency in management after corporate acquisitions led to declining standards. The rapid growth during the 1960s could not be sustained into the 1970s as the chain struggled with menu stagnation. While rivals introduced new burger variations, salads, and unique desserts, Burger Chef remained overly reliant on its original product line. Health-conscious attitudes, which emerged in the late 1970s, demanded fresher produce and leaner meats, but the chain's procurement systems lagged behind. They suffered from marketing complacency, failing to keep their brand message fresh in an environment that started celebrating diversity of cuisines. Rising labor costs, real estate pressures, and internal corporate strategy shifts at parent companies left little room for adaptation. By comparing their menu pricing to inflation data from that era, it's clear they lacked competitive pricing strategies in the face of surging rivals. Franchisees became dissatisfied as advertising support declined. Burger Chef eventually sold most outlets, and the brand disappeared, overshadowed by chains that remained agile. The name and concepts vanished entirely by the mid-1980s, making it one of the biggest cautionary tales in the fast food sector's history. Its downfall illustrated that early innovation without sustained adaptation leads straight into consumer indifference. Number 4. Howard Johnson's. A household name in mid-century America, Howard Johnson's peaked in the 1960s, boasting distinctive orange roofs and a vast menu. By the 1970s, as documented in travel guides and hospitality industry analyses, their outdated interiors and failure to refresh recipes made them seem trapped in the past. Family vacationers, once a captive audience thanks to the interstate highway system, gradually favored quicker, cheaper options at newer chains. Competitors introduced bolder flavors and cleaner, more modern decor. Market research from the late 1970s indicates that customers found Howard Johnson's offerings overly reliant on frozen, canned, and processed ingredients. While Americans sought more international influences, the chain stuck to its aging, comfort food-centric menu. Financial mismanagement and a series of questionable franchising decisions diluted quality. The rise of specialized fast food brands that excelled in particular niches, like pizza or tacos, also chipped away at their market share. Howard Johnson's attempted late-stage transformations, but these improvements came too late. By the early 1980s, most locations had closed or rebranded. The chain's fall shows how a once iconic brand can fade if it refuses to evolve with shifting culinary landscapes and consumer demands for freshness, variety, and ambiance. Number 5. Gino's Hamburgers. Launched by a former NFL player and known in certain regions for its hamburgers and fried chicken offerings, Gino's expanded aggressively in the 1960s and early 1970s. Historical, financial data, old televised commercials, and local newspaper reviews expose the flaws that triggered its decline. Gino struggled with brand identity. It was neither specialized enough to stand out for burgers, nor did it introduce signature innovations that sparked long-term consumer loyalty. While other chains refined cooking techniques and embraced standardized kitchen procedures ensuring uniform taste, Gino's inconsistently executed its menu across locations. Health reports from that era pointed to cleanliness issues in certain outlets, and consumers were increasingly intolerant of poor sanitation as media coverage of food safety heightened. Competitors implemented more sophisticated marketing campaigns, attractive promotional tie-ins, and flexible menu updates. Gino's relied heavily on nostalgia and sports-affiliated branding, rather than adapting to evolving palates. Eventually, it was acquired. converted, and phased out by the early 1980s. The name dissolved, leaving behind a legacy of a chain that couldn't keep pace with aggressive rivals and changing consumer priorities. Number 6, Lum's. Famous for its beer-steamed hot dogs and casual dining style, Lum's represented a quirky concept that briefly resonated with a laid-back 1970s crowd. However, in-depth examination of culinary trend reports and interviews with former patrons suggests that its menu grew stale. Consumers in the late 1970s began appreciating broader flavor profiles, more ethnic options, and lighter dishes. Lum's continued pushing relatively simple fare, hot dogs, fried sides, and limited entree variety, failing to respond to growing dietary consciousness. Additionally, the chain's ownership changed multiple times, causing strategic confusion. Corporate records show that each new owner tried different tactics without establishing a coherent identity. Meanwhile, competitors invested in improved decor, better training for staff, and marketing that resonated with an evolving demographic. By the time Lum's realized customers were tiring of heavy, greasy meals served in somewhat dated environments, it was too late. Financial strain and an inability to lure younger diners resulted in rapid store closures. By the early 1980s, Lum's was essentially extinct, underscoring that novelty alone can't sustain a restaurant brand when cultural trends shift so dramatically. Number 7, Red Barn. Known for its distinctive barn-shaped buildings and a menu featuring fried chicken, burgers, and fish, Red Barn once showcased a diverse fast food offering. Contemporary competitor analyses indicate that Red Barn's downfall stemmed from a lack of unified branding and menu refinement. The chain failed to invest in the kind of robust marketing campaigns that would have distinguished it from other emerging brands of the 1970s. While some burger chains introduced signature sauces or proprietary seasoning blends, Red Barn rarely evolved past its basic formulations. Internal turmoil among shareholders, documented in old franchise litigation records, prevented timely upgrades of kitchen equipment and restaurant interiors. As inflation and economic uncertainty rose, the chain struggled to maintain low prices without sacrificing quality. Customers began complaining about inconsistent portion sizes and flavor differences between locations. Rival chains perfected drive-through efficiency and expanded late-night hours, appealing to changing lifestyles. Red Barn remained rooted in outdated service models, pushing it out of relevance. By the end of the 1970s, closures were rampant, and no meaningful revival followed. The barns were torn down or repurposed, a testament to a brand that could not adapt swiftly enough to survive a fiercely competitive era. Number 8, Royal Castle. A regional burger chain offering inexpensive sliders and birch beer, Royal Castle once appealed to working-class families looking for quick meals. Searching through regional business directories and local restaurant reviews from the 1970s reveals that quality issues plagued the chain. Many outlets faced staffing shortages, poor training, and high turnover, leading to erratic customer experiences. Inventories of stale buns and subpar meats made headlines in local consumer complaint columns. As Americans developed a stronger taste for consistency and brand reliability, Royal Castle's archaic production methods and lukewarm marketing campaigns fell short. Competitors also leveraged expanding media, from TV commercials to printed coupons, to lure diners. Royal Castle stuck to traditional methods, ignoring opportunities to modernize service, upgrade interiors, or experiment with healthier sides. The rise of national fast food giants with standardized operations left Royal Castle struggling in obscurity. By the late 1970s, most units had closed, and attempts at revival were overshadowed by newcomers with better supply chains and fresher concepts. Their disappearance exemplifies the fate of small chains that resisted innovation and could not meet heightened consumer expectations. Number 9, Henry's Hamburgers. Founded as a drive-in style burger stop, Henry's Hamburgers enjoyed popularity during the 1950s and 1960s, but began struggling in the 1970s. historical menus and price sheets suggest that Henry's failed to keep up with evolving tastes. It rarely introduced new items, stuck to an outdated decor scheme, and did not embrace emerging fast food technologies that improved speed and consistency. Archival marketing studies indicate that customers became bored with Henry's predictable and unchanging lineup, especially as rival chains attracted attention with gimmicks, collectible merchandise, and expanding flavor profiles. Rising real estate costs and supply chain inefficiencies also played roles. Lacking the financial muscle to revamp its image, Henry's saw dwindling foot traffic. Franchisees began closing stores as profits evaporated. By comparing Henry's downfall to that of other mid-century chains, it's evident that they suffered from a rigid business model that refused to modernize. By the mid to late 1970s, the once familiar sign of Henry's hamburgers disappeared from American roadsides, leaving behind a memory of simpler times, overshadowed by a new era of culinary competition. Number 10, White Tower. A competitor to White Castle, White Tower tried to capture the slider market for decades. Historical legal documents and real estate records indicate the brand struggled with intellectual property battles and was forced to alter its building style to avoid confusion with its rival. As the 1970s progressed, White Tower's inability to keep menus contemporary combined with outdated architecture made them appear antiquated. Consumer surveys from that time show that their small burgers seemed greasy and lacked appealing freshness compared to evolving standards. Younger diners gravitated toward emerging brands that offered novelty or healthier options. White Tower also lagged in adopting the streamlined kitchen systems introduced by other chains. Without modernization, labor inefficiency and higher operational costs forced price increases. These hikes, in turn, drove customers to cheaper or better quality competitors. By analyzing urban development reports, it's evident that as downtown areas changed and suburbs expanded, White Tower failed to secure prime new locations. Most units closed, and by the end of the 1970s, the iconic towers were a rare sight. The chain's demise underscores how failing to innovate can make even a once popular concept seem obsolete. Number 11, Schrafft's. Originally popular as a refined dining spot famous for desserts and candy, Schrafft's thrived mid-century but floundered in the 1970s. Restaurant industry journals note that American dining habits shifted toward more casual, inexpensive, and globally inspired eats. Schrafft's remained tethered to traditional menus that featured dainty tea sandwiches, conservative lunch specials, and desserts that no longer felt special in a world embracing international pastries and bold flavors. The interiors, meant to evoke genteel dining, felt stuffy to younger patrons. Rising labor and ingredient costs forced menu price hikes without adding perceived value. Meanwhile, emerging family-style chains, fast casual concepts, and ethnic eateries intrigued diners. Schrafft's management, slow to modernize, failed to connect with the rapidly diversifying American palate. Archival interviews with former patrons reveal a sense of irrelevance. Nothing new, nothing adventurous. By the late 1970s, closures were widespread. The fading of Schrafft's symbolizes the cultural departure from old-fashioned dining traditions in favor of modern, exciting, and accessible restaurant experiences. Number 12, Pup and Taco. A Los Angeles-based chain blending hot dogs, tacos, and various quick snacks, Pup and Taco initially found success by capitalizing on California's car culture. However, deeper investigations into their operational history and menu strategies show that their limited approach, simple tacos with basic fillings, hot dogs with standard toppings, grew less appealing as authentic Mexican cuisine entered mainstream American diets. By the mid-1970s, customers yearned for richer, spicier flavors and fresher ingredients. Pup and Taco's reliance on pre-mixed sauces and inexpensive tortillas paled compared to new players offering bolder, more authentic dishes. Competitors also embraced efficient drive-through models, value menus, and promotional tie-ins. Pup and Taco, slow to respond, gained a reputation as generic and unimaginative. Menu stagnation in an era of explosive culinary creativity spelled doom. Eventually, many locations were acquired by Taco Bell, and the Pup and Taco brand faded away by the early 1980s, leaving behind the lesson that bland hybrid concepts fail when faced with authentic, evolving competitors. Number 13. Wetson's. A small hamburger chain primarily located in the New York area, Wetson's tried to challenge giants like McDonald's and Burger King during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Yet consumer reports at that time highlighted uneven quality, from overcooked patties to soggy buns. As the 1970s marched on, large national chains perfected their supply chains, ensuring consistent flavor and texture across all locations. Wetson's lacked such sophistication, and local newspaper ads reveal it rarely matched competitors' marketing budgets. Without strong promotional campaigns, customers drifted toward brands that felt more modern and reliable. Wetson's also failed to introduce menu items that addressed growing interests in chicken, salads, or breakfast options. Real estate shifts in urban and suburban areas placed Wetson's units at less advantageous spots, and they didn't invest in renovations. High overhead costs and lack of franchising muscle meant they could not compete at scale. By the late 1970s, Wetson's had vanished, a reminder that without rigorous quality control and strategic adaptability, even a once promising chain can disappear. Number 14. Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. A British-inspired fast food concept popular in the early 1970s, Arthur Treacher's once stood out for its battered cod and chips, but by reviewing evolving food journalism and consumer feedback, it's clear that the chain's downfall began as Americans became more health-conscious and increasingly wary of deep-fried foods saturated in oil. Also, the supply of quality cod fluctuated, forcing reliance on cheaper fish that lacked the original flavor. Competitors introduced grilled fish options, shrimp dishes, and even baked alternatives, appealing to a broadening set of tastes. Arthur Treacher's franchisees complained about high franchise fees and dwindling support. Over time, store interiors looked dated, and marketing campaigns seemed disconnected from younger audiences who preferred trendy seafood concepts or fresher, fast casual formats. Economic conditions, combined with a saturated fast food market, spelled the end for most outlets by the 1980s. Though a few locations linger, the brand's collapse in the late 1970s reveals how quickly trends can shift, leaving no room for chains that fail to proactively adapt. Number 15. Chi-Chi's. Although surviving into the 1980s and beyond, the seeds of Chi-Chi's eventual downfall were planted in the late 1970s. Early on, Chi-Chi's introduced many Americans to a form of Mexican cuisine that, while initially exotic, never significantly evolved beyond Americanized standards. By studying old menu pamphlets and culinary critiques from the era, it's evident that Chi-Chi's relied heavily on fried dishes, refried beans, and large portions of cheese-laden entrees. As the late 1970s gave rise to more authentic regional Mexican restaurants and fresher produce on grocery shelves, Chi-Chi's failed to pivot. Cocktails and a festive atmosphere sustained them for a while, but by not improving ingredient quality or offering lighter, more vibrant dishes, they gradually lost traction. In the long run, food safety incidents and a stale brand image would seal their fate. But the root cause, failing to keep pace with evolving consumer expectations, began decades earlier, illustrating how short-term success can mask long-term vulnerabilities. Number 16, Steak and Ale. Launched in 1966, Steak and Ale's British pub-inspired casual steakhouse concept rose quickly in popularity, but encountered headwinds by the late 1970s. Industry trade publications from that time note that American diners started demanding more diversified menus and slightly healthier options. Steak and Ale's format, dimly lit dining rooms, a salad bar heavy on mayo-based dressings, and thick cuts of steak felt increasingly dated as lighter fare and global flavors rose in popularity. Additionally, competitor steakhouses began offering seasonal specials, promotional tie-ins with local breweries, or improved wine lists. Steak and ale stuck to a model that worked in the 1960s but felt stagnant a decade later. Increased competition from cheaper buffet restaurants and emerging upscale casual chains squeezed their market share. High overhead costs associated with maintaining a faux upscale environment and failing to attract younger diners forced eventual closures. By analyzing corporate filings and consumer surveys, the picture emerges of a chain that failed to reinvent itself when cultural shifts demanded it, leading to a slow fade from relevance. Number 17. Delights. Arriving during a late 1970s health trend, Delights pitched itself as a healthier fast food alternative. Delving into nutritional studies and consumer commentaries reveals that while Delights use leaner meats and lower-calorie offerings, their food often lacked flavor, and the chain struggled to differentiate itself from emerging health-conscious competitors. Many customers saw their menu as bland, and portion sizes were too small to justify relatively high prices. The era's understanding of nutrition was still limited, and chains like Delights found it hard to educate customers while also delivering taste. As mainstream fast food giants began introducing salads and lighter menu items, Delights' novelty wore off. Franchisees complained about limited product innovation and inconsistent marketing support. Without robust brand loyalty or memorable signature dishes, they couldn't survive the market pressures of the early 1980s. The downfall of Delights illustrates that capitalizing on a trend without backing it up with strong flavors, fair pricing, and brand storytelling is not enough to achieve longevity. Number 18. Dipper Dan Ice Cream Parlor. A chain offering crepes, ice cream, and sundaes, Dipper Dan found modest success in the early 1970s. However, dessert trends shifted rapidly. Consumers began exploring premium ice creams, frozen yogurts, and eventually lighter gelatos. By examining old confectionery trade journals and customer surveys, one sees Dipper Dan's failure to update flavors or introduce seasonal specialties. Their parlors, often tucked into aging malls or dated shopping strips, lack the experiential quality that emerging dessert concepts introduced. While other brands played with gourmet toppings or healthier frozen treats, Dipper Dan stuck to basic sundaes and limited fruit crepes. Rising sugar awareness and dietary caution also hurt their heavy, sugary fare. Meanwhile, competitor ice cream shops invested in unique branding, better staff training, and consistent product innovation. Dipper Dan's inability to engage younger generations with trendy flavors or inventive dessert presentations led to declining foot traffic. By the 1980s, most locations had closed, a casualty of ignoring evolving dessert trends and the importance of atmosphere in creating a memorable treat experience. Number 19. Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. Once beloved for its old-timey decor, humorous staff uniforms, and elaborate sundaes, Farrell's thrived in the late 1960s and early 1970s by serving massive desserts that played into a sense of family fun. But as the decade wore on, Americans grew accustomed to more sophisticated dessert options and demanded higher quality ingredients. Industry analyses show Farrell's rarely upgraded its ice cream base or invested in truly artisan confections. Additionally, consumer tastes drifted from the sugary, carnival-like experience to more nuanced desserts found in emerging boutique ice cream shops and European-style cafes. The loud, gimmicky environment that once charmed families began to feel hokey and outdated to the emerging Gen X crowd. With inflation driving up ingredient costs, Farrell struggled to keep prices manageable without compromising quality. Competitors introduced better chocolate sauces, higher butterfat ice creams, and unique flavor profiles. Farrell's remained rooted in nostalgia, unable to recapture the public's imagination. By analyzing franchise agreements and store closure data, it's clear that attempts at modernization were half-hearted, leading to the chain's eventual disappearance. The decline of Farrell's demonstrates that relying solely on nostalgia and spectacle is risky when culinary expectations become more refined. Number 20. Horn and Hardart. Known for its famed automats, Horn and Hardart once stood as an iconic fixture of urban American dining. Although its heyday was earlier in the 20th century, the 1970s saw the brand struggle to stay relevant. By then, consumers demanded fresher ingredients, more variety, and modern conveniences like drive-thrus and comfortable seating areas. Horn and Hardart's reliance on coin-operated machines and pre-prepared items behind glass compartments felt quaint rather than cutting-edge. Historical documents, culinary critiques from the 1970s, and recorded interviews with former patrons reveal that as suburbs grew and car culture dominated, the idea of stopping at an automat in a busy city center lost appeal. Additionally, microwaves, frozen meals, and home convenience products made the automat concept less necessary. Meanwhile, emerging fast casual chains provided fresher dishes and more personalized service. Horn and Hardart's management tried introducing new menu items and even traditional cafeteria lines, but the brand's core concept no longer resonated with younger generations who saw it as an outdated relic. By the end of the 1970s and into the early 1980s, most Horn and Hardart locations had vanished. Their disappearance highlights how radical shifts in dining culture, real estate development, and consumer expectations for speed, service, and quality can render once innovative concepts obsolete.